welcome to Listening to Lancaster. I'm Diana Martin with Hourglass, and it's my pleasure to be joined today by Jake Thorsen, the SoWe Neighborhood Director. Thanks so much for being here today, Jake.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'd also like to thank our sponsors for these episodes, Lap Electric, Landis Communities, and Martin Insurance for their support of Hourglass. So let's jump right in. Jake, what is SoWe and how did it get started?
Yeah, so SoWe is a community development initiative supported by Tenfold, various other partner community-based organizations, and most importantly, the residents of Southwest Lancaster City. So SoWe organizes residents and builds coalitions to stem the tide of disinvestment and create resident-driven, equitable solutions to problems and to advocate for the neighborhood. The origins of SoWe really stem back to early 2014, 2015, when there was many different community partners working in the Southwest part. Lancaster Housing Opportunity Partnership, now Tenfold, was purchasing single family homes in the neighborhood, renovating them, selling them to first-time home buyers through our home buyer education program. And then that really, purchasing one home, turned into purchasing several homes on the block, and just looking more strategic at the neighborhood as a whole. Also during this time, the Lancaster Safety Coalition and Millersville University were organizing residents and looking at concerns around safety and trying to build coalitions of residents to address some safety concerns. So with all that work, and organizing residents around that time, we realized there was a need for a larger comprehensive community development strategy. And in partnership with the regional foundation, we spent around 2 years surveying, organizing residents, and gathering feedback to generate now what is called and known as the Southwest Revitalization Strategy, which is a 10-year vision for the neighborhood. To really kind of get in and develop and raise residents up and really focus on kind of equity and development.
So I think that plan that you mentioned, you put that together back in 2016. What did you learn when you were putting together that plan, and what were some of the major strategies identified for the Southwest Lancaster neighborhood?
Yeah, we learned a ton. We learned some that a lot of residents and people knew already, but the plan really allowed us to kind of get data to back some of those points up, right? So we learned that Southwest Lancaster largely is a marginalized community that lacked sufficient supports from the wider community. We lacked a large anchor institutions that some of the other neighborhoods had that were doing community development work. And residents, the general sense from residents, they felt that the neighborhood was largely ignored, passed over for different improvement projects and different investments. We also learned that our housing stock is incredibly aged and poor, in need of repair, and there was a large amount of rental properties in the neighborhood, some that were, to say nicely, weren't managed as well as they could be. We also learned there were serious concerns about safety, and residents kind of often lack the ability to organize to address safety concerns. And we also learned that residents also lacked resources to access jobs and resources to really build wealth. There was also a large lack of public amenities, such as clean and safe parks and public spaces. And through this process, and most importantly, we really learned what is possible when residents organize and demand change for the neighborhood. So the strategies really identified in the 2016 plan focus around the following key points here. So housing, economic opportunity, neighborhood connections, park and public realms, community safety, and education. So those are the big key areas that the plan calls for to invest in.
So that plan has been in place just about 5 years now. What does that look like on the ground? How have you been putting that into action?
Yeah, so on the ground, it looks like many different things. Kind of, we've implemented a great deal of programs and investments in the neighborhood, and expanded some existing programs as well. We also have a resident-led advisory board of directors that oversees the SoWe plan, and they really ensure that the investments made into the neighborhood aligned with neighborhood needs and wishes. Under that board is 7 standing committees that all focus on the key strategy areas that I just talked about: housing, safety, et cetera. So all these, the larger board and the committee is made up of residents, various stakeholders, business owners, that have a tie or live in the neighborhood or have some tie to the neighborhood, really are the kind of action centers of the initiative, right? These are the individuals that are driving the change, developing programs, talking through issues, setting budgets, all that. And that's, again, all resident driven. In terms of programs that have been established, the list is pretty extensive. I'll try to be brief and kind of give a quick overview of what they are. So in terms of housing, again, talked about housing as one of the biggest needs in the neighborhood. So we've increased down payment assistance for residents to purchase their first home. Through Tenfold's community lending, we lend to developers and residents to repair homes, and to rent or to sell, or to just continue to occupy if you're a homeowner. Creation of affordable home repair program, facade improvement grant with Lancaster City Alliance. And we also have a housing location program to help residents find housing, safe, secure, affordable housing at this point. In terms of safety, again, another big concern in the neighborhood. We've implemented the bicycle ambassadors in the neighborhood. There has been the creation of a free porch light program to brighten up the streets so residents can get a free light on their block, or on their house. In terms of parks and public spaces, we really worked closely with the city to renovate what is now Carlton Park, formerly Farnham Park, behind the Water Street Mission there, which is kind of a completely new public space that exists now. We've really, with that new space, have been sponsoring a lot of programs, reoccurring programs for kids, for families, such as a STEM workshop with Lancaster Science Factory that has been in the park last summer, and hopefully this summer again. We've also established a clean crew, so we have residents that we work with to go out and literally pick up litter throughout the neighborhood. It's a paid position, so we have 2 staff people that go out and do that in the summer months. In terms of education, we've worked really closely with the Boys and Girls Club of Lancaster, their Hill Clubhouse, and we worked really closely with Price Elementary School, which is the elementary school within our boundaries here. And we've scaled them up as a full service community school, which has been a huge win for the neighborhood and for that school. And then neighborhood connections, right? The ability for neighbors to connect and know each other and grow from that. We've established a series of community events, thrown countless block parties, excited to have block parties back post-pandemic, and really work to brand the neighborhood, right? The SoWe name is fairly new. Just a note on the name, we think of the SoWe neighborhoods, right, of like this larger swath of Southwest Lancaster. There's neighborhoods within them, Cabbage Hill being the biggest, most prominent, historically known neighborhood within SoWe. So that's some of the programs. There's more. Again, that was as brief as I could make it, but I didn't want to leave any out.
Yeah, you guys have a lot going on. I am curious about what the response was to the branding of kind of rolling out SoWe as an official name and brand for the neighborhood. What was the response to that?
Yeah, there was a lot of excitement that was generated around it, right? It was like, creating a brand, creating awareness around that, generated a lot of excitement and a lot of buzz from neighbors and from people that were outside the neighborhood or outside the community. Unfortunately, a lot of times, some neighborhoods in the city, including SoWe, didn't have the best reputation from the larger community, right? It's considered a marginalized, poorer community. So rebranding it was kind of part of this effort to kind of allow residents to rename or take ownership of their neighborhood and kind of define it as they see it. And also, again, wanted to kind of pay tribute to some of the older historic neighborhood names in the neighborhood. So it's been, we've continued to use the name and try to provide different branding opportunities throughout the neighborhood to let people know where they are in the neighborhood when they've arrived.
You are frequently in touch with residents through your board and the committees. What do residents see right now as the biggest challenges and opportunities for the SoWe neighborhood?
The biggest challenges right now kind of focus around housing and safety are the two things that rise above the rest in our community. So last year, unfortunately, we experienced a higher rate of shots fired and homicides in the neighborhood than we would have liked and that we've seen in years past. We really need to ensure residents and kids are safe in the neighborhood and live without the fear of violence. We need the community at large to understand that violence is not tolerated here and really doesn't define us as a neighborhood. We also need larger mental health supports as that really relates to crime, mechanisms for de-escalation, so that things don't lead to violence. And then we also need kind of supports for residents and victims of violence to really process that trauma that exists. So these are all things we've been grappling with in terms of crime and safety. On the housing front, I'm sure you hear this a lot in your work doing throughout the county, but housing is a huge need in the neighborhood throughout the county. There's a significant lack of quality, affordable rental properties and purchase opportunities in the neighborhood. Incomes are not keeping up with costs of housing. And unfortunately, we've seen many residents kind of have to move out of the neighborhood because of rising costs. So we really need to increase the supply of housing, create pathways for residents to purchase home within the neighborhood, and advocate for those who have barriers for traditional housing options.
And you're actually part of Tenfold. So how does that relationship work, and how does that maybe strengthen some of the opportunities for working on these housing issues?
So we look at Tenfold. We're a program of Tenfold, we call it. Tenfold's our parent organization. So for those of you that are unfamiliar, Tenfold is a newer name, newer brand. It is a result of the merger of Tabor Community Services and Lancaster Housing Opportunity Partnership, which came together in 2021 as a result of a large merger process of taking two really strong housing organizations, merging them to create kind of a one house of housing needs and resources for the community. So us having the backbone of a large housing agency really gives us a lot of opportunities to kind of dig into some of the work that's occurring at Tenfold, whether that's housing counseling, direct client assistance, rental assistance. Those things have really been expanded, and we have kind of a foothold in the SoWe neighborhood to provide those resources to individuals. we've at Tenfold, we really piloted a lot of programs in SoWe, seeing direct needs from residents, people on our board advocating for different housing issues and needs, and then taking that and saying, okay, we kind of have a nimble neighborhood organization. Let's try to pilot something in the Southwest neighborhood, and then hopefully expand that to, the larger community. So that backbone as a housing organization really kind of helps drive kind of the response to the housing needs here.
You recently surveyed neighborhood residents to understand current quality of life perceptions and needs. What are you learning from those survey results?
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, in 2016, we did that large kind of community planning, community surveying process. We're 5 years into that work now. So we've just finished resurveying the neighborhood. One, to kind of understand how what current perceptions in the neighborhood are and how they've changed since we started, since the interventions of different community development investments. So a lot of what we're seeing is kind of what we're talking about, right? Is there's concerns about safety, there's concerns about affordability in housing, fears that individuals may not be able to stay in the neighborhood, but want to. And we're also learning that the work of engaging residents is never really done, right? It's kind of this constant push and constant attention to make sure that we are in front of individuals and organizing people and making sure that resources are available to residents and they're aware of that they're available.
Is there anything from that survey that surprised you?
No, unfortunately, no. I think a lot of what we're seeing is, again, like the understanding that housing's the issue of crime and safety, right? And it was just some validation of what we've seen and talked about in the neighborhood. And that's good. Again, going back to the point of like, there's a lot of perceptions in the neighborhood, and then having kind of quality data to back those perceptions up is a big win. In terms of helping one to kind of set the message of the neighborhood, and also to kind of fundraise, write grants to have actual data to back up what people are experiencing on the day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. So what's next for SoWe? What's the future?
Yeah, so the future is it's exciting. It's an exciting time right now for SoWe, because we have the end of our kind of initial 5-year investment. We have this comprehensive community survey that just finished up. So this year is kind of a lot of reflection, looking back, doing kind of impact reporting, understanding what investments really worked, what didn't, how have metrics have changed in the neighborhood, or possibly how they didn't, right? So this year, again, it's kind of looking back over the last 5 years and seeing what worked, what didn't. And then taking all that information and then pushing for another 5-year investment in the neighborhood of piloting new things, continuing programs that did work. So this year is kind of like this reflection piece, while continuing the good work, right? But it's also pushing for kind of an update of the strategy. It's crazy to say, but 2016, I'm sure you experienced this, feels like an incredibly long time ago, right? The city has changed so much, the neighborhood has changed so much, and then our daily lives have really changed so much. So it's really important that we keep the initiative fresh, right? And keep the needs and resources that are available to people, make sure those are fresh as well.
As you start on some of that reflecting, does anything come to mind so far of programs or initiatives that you felt like really worked? Yeah. And what are some of the areas where maybe you're still need more investment or still trying to figure out solutions?
Yeah, I think it's like a both end, right? We've seen a lot of programs work around, education. The community school is up and running, and this kind of beautiful model of providing supports to families. We've seen a lot of our housing interventions work. And a lot of our safety interventions work at the same time, but we're still seeing this as a need, right? So it's kind of like doubling down on a lot of these investments too, making sure of like, how do we continue the work in terms of crime and safety? I talked about like mental health and trauma responses. We're also looking into like neighborhood mediation. We've had partnered with Advos mediation services to do a lot of kind of debriefing after violent incidences, and working to kind of organize the neighborhood around crime and violence incidences. So I think a lot of it is, again, kind of doubling down, making sure that what we've done, that we continue and kind of invest in potentially different ways, but still kind of keep the message and the programs moving forward.
Are there any other similar initiatives to SoWe in the rest of the county? Is this a model that you'd like to see in other communities?
Yeah, there is other neighborhood groups, right, in the city that are organized pretty well. I would love to see continued work, in this space, right, of really having residents engage with each other, engage with different nonprofits to kind of set their own course, is something that I think every neighborhood should have. Unfortunately, not every neighborhood does, right? So making sure that, I think, yeah, throughout the county, it would be amazing if more communities had it. I think the Southeast, in the city with Saca, they have a similar model that they've been implementing, which is great. And I would love to see it, and increase funding for neighborhoods. I think the best, residents setting their own course, right? Setting where investments should be made, kind of this bottom up development is really our best strategy to kind of ward off the ills of gentrification, housing displacement, and ensure development is kind of aligned with the individuals that live there.
What do you hear from the residents? And I know you also live in the southwest part of Lancaster City, about what they love the most about living there.
About living in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
It's mixed. I think the biggest thing I hear consistently is people love the diversity of the neighborhood. You can walk out and hear multiple languages being spoken. You can smell different types of food being cooked. You're part of a community that necessarily doesn't always look like you, but still feels like home. I think that is a huge a benefit about living here. I always say the architecture of the neighborhood kind of matches the culture of the neighborhood, right? It's like these extremely dense row homes where walls are shared, right? And then with that sharing of walls, there's the sharing of culture, sharing of ideas. So again, incredibly diverse, incredibly kind of cohesive and fulfilling to be part of the community.
So how can people who are listening get involved and support your work? I imagine that maybe looks a little different if you're a resident of SoWe. And then if someone isn't a resident of SoWe, what are some of the avenues to get involved?
Yes, if you're a resident, definitely reach out to us. Go on our website, SoWeLancaster.org, join a committee. We have standing committees that are really kind of, again, the powerhouses, the workforces of this initiative. So join a committee, attend board meetings are open to the public, attend a meeting. It's a great opportunity to kind of understand what's happening in the neighborhood and what things are being discussed. If you're not a resident, other great ways to support the neighborhood. Again, we're fundraising right now for another 5-year investment. So donations and gifts are always appreciated. I would also say, come visit us if you live outside of the county. I can't tell you how many times I hear people that live outside the city say, I've never been, or I haven't been in that community for decades. come down, appreciate the architecture, visit, the beautiful St. Joseph's Church, get food at J&J Mofongo or Torres Bakery, play in Culleton Park. There's just so many great things to do. And then I would also say, we're kind of place-based, right? Where we focus on a very small piece of the county in the scheme of things. But be a good neighbor, right? No matter where you live, a lot of our municipal lines are lines, they're boundaries, and kindness goes beyond those boundaries. So do small gestures, get to know your neighbors, kind of meet and engage with them, get outside your comfort zone. And then I would say, again, getting to the point of these municipal lines are mostly arbitrary, right? I would say advocate for affordable housing in your community, right? The housing need and stress goes beyond municipal lines, and we need kind of higher quality housing. We need larger supports for individuals that are dealing with housing needs.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that we need to think about affordable housing across the whole city and county, and not just in certain neighborhoods, that the need is really community wide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there anything else I didn't ask you about that you wanted to share today?
I think we covered a ton.
Well, I really appreciate your time. It was so great to hear more about the SoWe initiative. And thanks so much for being with us today, Jake. For everyone who's listening, you can find more episodes of Listening to Lancaster on our YouTube channel and on our website at hourglasslancaster.org. And really appreciate the conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.